Thank you to my newest patrons Keegan Shepard and MZ. I appreciate your generosity, and as always, you can reach me with any questions or concerns via Patreon PM, Minds.com, or Twitter at A Helping Hand for Me. Every dollar helps, every dollar is appreciated, and every pledge of $10 or more will earn you a permanent spot in my video credits. Alright guys, so here's part 2 of the Q&A, given my passing of the 13,000 marker, and the 14,000 marker for that matter, so I suppose I could keep it going. But honestly, I think I'll wait to do another video like this one until, say, the 20,000 marker. Not that I don't appreciate everything you guys have done for me, I'm honestly astonished at the momentum I've suddenly gained. It's awesome, and I can't tell you how grateful I am. But I never expected so many subscribers so quickly, and it's a little difficult to keep up with the per thousand standard I'd originally set. And I know you guys would rather see me focus on hunting SJWs, so we'll set the next one at 20,000 for now. In the meantime, I'm open to any suggestions for a different kind of celebration video once that day comes. Alright, let's get started. What do you think of Donald Trump and the war with Russia? Honestly, I never supported Trump, even if his campaign and presidency have already made for some hilarious memes. I simply saw him as the lesser of two evils. Despite treating the presidential race as if it were a fucking game, and obviously concerned with nothing beyond his own ego, he at least stunts the growth of social justice influence in our government. And while the growing conflict with Russia depresses me in having dashed my hopes that the world powers had largely grown since the stupid Mexican standoff that was the last Cold War, I guarantee Hillary Clinton would have gotten us to all-out war much faster, especially since she all but slapped Vladimir Putin in the face with talks of a no-fly zone over Syria. In truth, all I want is for the human race to stop fighting over stupid bullshit and start taking strides in a productive direction. With our common enemy in the Islamic extremists of the Middle East, I had at least assumed that we had grounds for that kind of alliance with Russia. I had hoped that we'd finally start colonizing other planets in a multinational joint effort to render the imaginary lines dividing us a thing of the past, and that the significance of this one celestial mudball would diminish in such a way that would humble us and give us perspective. But with our souring relationship with Russia over the past couple of years, it seems that's not likely to happen in my lifetime, if at all. As things are now, I'll just be grateful if we don't wind up raising a second generation under the terror of duck and cover. I would like to hear your opinion on Riley Dennis, specifically her views on childhood transgenders. Medical science tells us that the frontal lobe doesn't fully develop until the early 20s. I have no problem whatsoever with a consenting adult choosing to transition, more power to them. However, I have to question the ethics of anyone who advocates for hormones for children. Riley Dennis is a joke. If I actually respected this person, I'd have no problem calling him she. But I refuse to feed the delusion that is fueling his holier-than-thou tirade against anyone who identifies as cisgender. As if it isn't enough that he's reduced his supposed womanhood into that of a walking Pantene Pro V commercial, he then calls himself so gay for being attracted to other women. He is just another example of a social justice parody come to life, and his has been an especially sanctimonious and annoying moral dictatorship. He touts the same message as Michael Rowlands when it comes to the topic of gender, and that particular mischaracterization of the word was what motivated me to start a channel of my own. On top of that, he insists that a straight person who doesn't want to have sex with a transsexual is somehow a bigot, even though he also supports the feminist narratives against sexual harassment and the supposed male sense of entitlement to a woman's body. He's become one gigantic double standard in bad makeup. The only thing that matters to him is how much attention he can drum up for himself, and he will happily throw children too young to consider any of these things under the bus in order to get it. In short, he feels that he is entitled to all of the respect and admiration in the world for being the brave special snowflake that he is, even though he is not inclined to give the same respect to those who disagree and do not identify with his chosen path in life. Honestly, the only reason I haven't responded to any of his videos yet is because he hasn't really said anything recently that I haven't at least indirectly responded to regarding other people who share his views. But I'm sure that will change soon enough. Can you please post links of your old stories for those of us who have not seen them? Unfortunately, my stories don't exist anywhere online at the moment except for on the channels of those who have narrated them. I used to have them posted on a Tumblr account that I started some time ago specifically to promote Pleasant Nightmares. But Amazon didn't appreciate it, and in so many words, they basically told me to take them down or I wouldn't be allowed to host my anthology on their platform. But as I've said before, I'm in the process of putting it through another edit, and once that's done, I'll be making the announcement here. Since you like Giger, what is your opinion on the art of Tsutomu Nihei and Yukito Kishiro? By the way, would you give me tips if I were to show you my sketches? I am familiar with their work, and I generally do like what I've seen from them. When it comes to anime and manga, I've always gravitated toward those with darker, cyberpunk-oriented aesthetics, but I honestly don't feel that either of them compare to Giger. H.R. Giger coined a visual language that was all his own, a style that he refined to his personality. While both of these artists are very skillful, it's clear that they still take note from manga artists that came before them, if for nothing else than the fact that anime style has remained mostly consistent in terms of facial and body proportions. Neither of them are really pioneers in the same way that Giger was. And sure, I'd be happy to take a look at them, but be warned, I am a terrible teacher when it comes to art, especially these days as I'm out of practice and terribly rusty. If you really want to learn how to improve, I suggest you look into a channel called Draw with Jazza. I referenced his channel a few videos back, and he is one of the better instructors I've seen both in terms of character design and animation. How do you feel about libertarianism and libertarian YouTubers, Shane Killian, Julie Borowski, Hoodie Demon, etc.? I am aware of these channels, particularly Shane Killian, but if I'm honest, it's been quite some time since I've paid any real attention to their content. It's nothing against them or anything, it's just that I can only divide up my attention so many ways. But I reiterate that I am not concerned with labels like libertarianism nearly as much as the arguments themselves. And using Shane Killian as an example, it seems that we at least mostly agree on the most current and relevant issues at hand, demonstrated nicely in his response to Aquila Obviously's always punch Nazis bullshit. But then again, I find that we disagree on certain other issues, one in particular being his near certainty that the government is racist in its lack of representation of minorities, demonstrating that he clearly doesn't understand that correlation does not necessarily equal causation. There certainly may be racist members of our government, I don't deny that possibility at all. But what I do deny is the idea that the very infrastructure of our government is a racist good old boys club by default, simply because we don't see more black and brown faces in Congress. Especially with a complete lack of hard legislation keeping them out, and a complete failure to take into consideration how many minorities actually run for office in the first place. However, as I said before, I'm here to build bridges, not to burn them. Those disagreements can be discussed later. Right now, we need as many voices speaking out against this social justice crap as possible, and I am content to ignore topics that spark infighting until the threat at hand is suppressed. Tearing apart our own community is only going to make it harder for us to resist the social justice dreadnought currently on our doorstep and poised to storm through academic circles and the government to get their way. You like metal? If so, favorite bands and genres? If not, why? Yes, I like metal. Everything from Judas Priest all the way up through what I've heard referred to as melodic death metal from bands like Dark Tranquillity and Soilwork. Although I'm not exactly an audiophile, music has just been an inspiration to me in terms of my writing and my art. But I'm not knowledgeable enough or enough of an enthusiast to hold my own in discussions about subgenres, particularly with the purists in any given genre. For me, when it comes to music, it goes no farther than the bourgeois statement, I don't know art, but I know what I like. And if I like it, I'll listen to more like it. You briefly mentioned Legacy of Kain. You want it back, don't you? What other games do you like? Favorite consoles? I'd definitely like to see the series continue, although only under the direction of Amy Hennig herself. But I honestly can't imagine it being the same without the voice of Tony J. There are a lot of games that I like, but my favorites as of late have been Prototype and Warhammer 40k Space Marine, mainly because they're amazing stress relievers. But as I said shortly after starting this channel, my all-time favorite franchise is now and will probably always be Mega Man, particularly the Mega Man X titles. In terms of consoles, I was on the Nintendo side of the Nintendo-Sega console war of the 90s, but then gravitated to Sony toward the later days of the PS1 and the early days of the PS2. These days, I don't have a particular favorite console. In fact, I'm more of the opinion that console rivalry isn't helping the video game industry as a whole, and that console exclusives are only helping to speed up its stagnation. That's one of the big reasons I'm putting together a PC, because platforms like Steam are starting to bring back all the parts that mattered about the early competition in the 8-bit era. It's helping to establish a new wave of innovation from ambitious, independent developers. Any thoughts on Cartoon Network, Disney, or Nickelodeon cartoons, current or classic? I haven't paid attention to any of them for at least the last 10 years, especially Cartoon Network. The animation has gotten lazy, and in terms of humor, I just don't get it. Over a decade ago, though, I was a fan of many of Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon's original series. Rugrats, Hey Arnold, Angry Beavers, and Cat Dog were some of my favorites from Nickelodeon. I never much cared for the Powerpuff Girls, but I was a fan of just about every other original series to come out of Cartoon Network, especially Ed, Edd and Eddy. I've been marathoning that series recently, and it's every bit as good as I remember it. I just hope Danny Antonucci finds another spot in the mainstream limelight, because he's a fantastic animator and director. Who are other creepypasta authors you admire? Vincent V. Cava, UnsettlingStories.com, anyone else? Well, the first two who come to mind are Vincent Van Gogh and Michael Whitehouse, with whom I've been featured in Mr. Creepypasta's anthologies and in his viral marketing campaign for the movie The Pyramid. Too bad that movie turned out to be garbage. Beyond them, my favorites would have to be 1000 Vultures and his Pen Pal series, and Jad Usable and his Ben Drown series. I know you have went into it in your Tim video, but what is your medical condition in a bit more detail if you don't mind, and keep up the work, love your vids. I'll save the detail for my mental illness collaboration with Reckless Trucker, but suffice it to say for now that it's a handful of psychiatric disorders that have made my social and romantic life a living hell. The most recent diagnosis is avoidant personality disorder, persistent depressive disorder, and mild somatic symptom disorder. Though I've taught myself to cope over the years, social situations are often nightmarish, and the stress tends to cause physical illnesses like vertigo, disorientation, and nausea, along with a few other unrelated physical problems which I suppose are just the consequence of getting older. Gotta love the human condition. Do you have any specific practices to separate yourself from bias? You are incredibly objective in what you say, and when you do have bias, you seem to have an easy time admitting it and making up for it. Personally, I am just about the exact opposite, but I hope to change that. Is there a certain way of thinking that you use when you make these videos? Other than being sure to check the sources behind a claim and the reputation of those sources, there aren't any particular practices that I really have at my disposal, which is honestly why I'd like to have the guidance of someone like Teal Deer or Sargon of Akkad, who are more methodical in their research. But I do find that the best policy is to avoid double standards at all costs. If your argument does not run in line with a standard to which you would hold yourself, then do not expect it to sound reasonable to hold your opposition to it either. Do not hold feminism to a standard to which you would not hold MGTOW. Do not hold liberals to a standard to which you would not hold conservatives. If you would not support violence against anyone with whose opinion you agree, you would sound like a hypocritical dumbass for supporting violence against anyone with whom you disagree. As a general rule of thumb, understand that no sane person sees him or herself as the bad guy, and by employing any tactic in your own approach to a fight, you permit that very same tactic for those to whom you stand opposed. Treat others as you would have them treat you. For making videos, how do you stay calm and keep your cool? I honestly couldn't at the time due to things. I don't really think I keep my calm all the time. I've gotten angry quite a few times. I think I'm just naturally more soft-spoken than most of the other channels out there. But really, it's mostly just up to the process. I don't watch the videos and pause to record my responses. I watch the videos through once, then again while pausing, recording the timestamps, and then compose my responses in a transcript. Then I record my responses. And by the time I get to that step, any reactionary anger I might have initially felt will have dissipated so I can focus. What would you do if you were forced to take a very liberal sociology class without a conservative counterpart? It doesn't seem fair to me that we are forced to hear one side without the other and be expected to just learn from one source. As a college student, this both frustrates me and angers me because I am a right-leaning independent. What are your thoughts? Also, how do you feel about Milo and his talks? Well, I imagine I'd take the opportunity to expose their bullshit straight from the source. Maybe they could force me to attend the class, but they wouldn't control what I'd say about it outside of that classroom. And that includes both this channel and my attempts to raise awareness to the powers that be. Rest assured, I would not be a model student. My hours in that classroom would be nothing more than an excuse to fill up another sketchbook, between taking notes on what parts of their nonsense need to be dismantled first. As for Milo, I find it insane that he has been one of the loudest and most influential voices in the conservative rally against this social justice shit, even though such open, flamboyant displays of homosexuality seemed to be the bane of the Republican Party less than a decade ago. Insane in a good way, though, as he has done more than most to embolden the rest of us who are tired of SJWs and their divisive crap. I find it insane in a bad way that so many people turn their noses up at him simply because he refused to play ball when he was being badgered to name his childhood abuser. People who undoubtedly wouldn't have given a shit had that abuser been female. Whether you agree with him in his silence or not, that incident does not devalue his every previous contribution to this fight, and the unapologetic approach he takes in addressing these issues remains a solid example we should all follow in dealing with this anti-white, anti-male nonsense. One of the biggest problems we have as a species is that we're prone to letting one negative experience invalidate every positive experience preceding it. And I'm admittedly guilty of this as well, hanging on to the keyboard warrior's need to respond to damn near every negative, unproductive comment that rears its ugly head in one of my videos. That's a problem I'm trying to work through, but it hasn't robbed me of the ability to see the bigger picture, and that's what we all need to be focusing on. Are you pro-gun, and what state do you live in? I live in Colorado, and these days I'm sort of on the fence concerning guns. I acknowledge that the more people who have guns in this country, the more likely they are to make their way into the hands of an irresponsible dumbass or mass murderer. However, I'm also not blind to the fact that guns will remain available through black market channels even if they were more heavily restricted, and that they are indispensable in personal defense because of it. Every gun is another chance for a kid to get their hands on it, think it's a toy, and tragically lose their life. But every gun is also another chance to save a life that would have otherwise been lost to an armed aggressor, especially with the insanity we just saw in Berkeley. So I don't think banning guns outright is the answer, nor do I think a gun in every hand is the answer. What I actually believe is that we need to re-examine the issue from square one and restructure all of the laws of gun ownership and accountability accordingly. But that's going to require compromise from both sides of that particular debate, which I just don't see happening anytime soon. What is your thought on immigration into America or any country for that matter? P.S. Ranting Monkey is another great YouTube that does streams every night with other YouTubers. I was thinking it would be great if you might join one. I do intend to tell him, as much as I can being one person, about you. I would love to see you guys do collabs. We shouldn't be closing our doors entirely to immigration. I've never once heard a compelling argument from any nationalist. They virtually always come off as racist and elitist. I am of the opinion that our species is only ever going to realize its full potential once we come together for the good of all mankind. However, I'm not so naive as to think that everyone will be agreeing with me on that point anytime soon. Clearly, otherwise I wouldn't have started this channel in the first place. So while I think being open to immigration remains a core value that our country should maintain in the spirit of our founding fathers' vision, it needs to come with a suitable measure of discretion. Not every Muslim is a terrorist, but the reality is that the vast majority of terrorist strikes for the past few decades have come from certain Muslim countries over the concept of jihad, and those terrorist organizations currently in power have openly expressed their intention of using the refugees as a vehicle to usher their operatives within our borders. Frankly, this is the problem with the two-party system. Every issue, no matter how complex, becomes black and white on both sides of the fence. And to our peril, few issues receive the honest consideration that they deserve, as they are reduced to reactionary talking points to secure votes. Do not be so blinded by sentiments of political correctness that you become incapable of prudently observing reality. But also, don't be so blinded by patriotism that it robs you of your humanity. And yes, I'm definitely a fan of Ranting Monkey. We've exchanged pleasantries, though I haven't yet had the chance to speak to him at length. But he has said that he'd be open to collaboration, so you can expect to see one with him soon. What are your religious beliefs? If not, do you believe in a god? I'm an atheist. I've seen no reason to believe that any version of God humanity has concocted in any of its religions exists as they envision him, her, or it. And I have every reason to believe that if there is in fact a god, it is a being unlike any we can imagine, beyond anything we can fathom, and that does not value the lives of a bunch of hairless apes too smart for their own good any more than any other creature on this rock, or anywhere else in the universe. And consequently, I believe that our insistence on oppressing and killing each other over who has the best imaginary friend is a childish relic of an ancient world that we desperately need to outgrow. What do you think of the works of fiction that start out as fanfiction, i.e. 50 Shades of Grey? Do you think they should be considered as legitimate works of fiction? P.S. I really would like to become an author someday, so you really inspire me in that aspect. I am of the opinion that any avenue that leads you to a good idea is an avenue to be valued. The way I understand it, Dungeons & Dragons was first inspired by the works of J.R.R. Tolkien. Breaking Bad was fantastic, and spawned an equally fantastic spin-off in Better Call Saul, which wouldn't have made as much sense or as much of an impact without the context of its predecessor. And for that matter, all of the greatest works in Games Workshop's Black Library are from the minds of different authors writing their own take on the Warhammer 40k universe. The problem with most fanfiction isn't that it plays off of someone else's idea, but that it's usually written by people who have little to no skill in the craft, and it usually contributes nothing to the story beyond satisfying some shallow fantasy of the author, especially when based off of a creatively bankrupt Mary Sue-addled piece of garbage like Twilight. I guess what I'm trying to say is that fanfiction is fine as an expression of enthusiasm for a particular franchise. Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, yes, but it is also the sincerest form of plagiarism. So if you actually care about writing a good story, you do well to make it your own and distance yourself from your source of inspiration as much as you can. But if you haven't settled on a topic, it can make for a good exercise. If you like a particular work of fiction, don't just embellish those parts you found enjoyable. Do yourself the favor of dissecting the author's method and understanding how they think. Have you considered doing a collaboration with Big Dicko? I'd actually love to see how that would go, or even better, Prince of Queens. Certainly, I like both of those channels. If they've heard of me and would be open to it, I'd love to collab with them. My next question is, aside from your anthology, do you have any proud accomplishments before or after you started this channel? Keep up the great work. Apart from my name having spread as far as it has, and having opened the doors for me that it has, not really. I still have a long way to go and a lot of growing to do. For now, I'm content to know that there are so many out there who think I have the potential to go the distance. How creepy is creepypasta and how glorious is 4chan? P.S. Please give my apologies for the lateness of the collab due to technical and time management errors. Well, that depends on how talented the author is or how relentless the troll is. And no worries, man. Personally, I don't think I'd have the patience to oversee a collaboration that big just yet. But like I said, if you haven't contacted Master Creep Theater about it just yet, you really should. Especially if all you need is one more contributor. Do you read or like fantasy, and do you have any favorites in the genre? My list of authors and books is longer than mentioned here. I actually haven't read much fantasy. I don't know why, I've just never had much interest in the genre as far as novels go, which is surprising considering some of my earliest efforts as a writer were at least partially fantasy-based. I am open to recommendations though. As far as I can tell, Tolkien's Lord of the Rings trilogy pretty much set the standard. First off, thanks for answering my question. Didn't expect it out of the sea of questions. Secondly, count yourself lucky that you have personally missed out on the big stuff, and I hope you can make sure your nieces don't fall too far into that stuff. They deserve better than to be lied to. As someone who works with an artist writing dark stories for their pieces, what originally encouraged you into putting your stuff out there? Was it just coincidence, good timing, or a logical next step? It is really just a matter of convenience. By the time I became aware of the creepypasta scene, it already had a decent-sized avid following, and compared to some of the better-known works out there, I felt that I had refined my skill enough that I could hold my own. But trying to stand out among the thousands of other stories already out there in the forums and on the wiki was a battle that just wasn't worth fighting, especially considering I've never been very good at self-promotion. So I decided to approach some of the lesser-known narrators on YouTube first, and then slowly work my way up the ladder until I eventually got the attention of Mr. Creepypasta and Chilling Tales for Dark Nights. The only trouble is that I don't really know where to go from here, and I still can't quite call what I do a career just yet. So to any fan of my work here, as always, I'm open to suggestions. Are you actually a helping hand? Sure. Why? Do you not find me helpful? Favorite game? Thoughts about Undertale? Well, I just listed my current favorites earlier, and as for Undertale, I've yet to play it, but I've heard good things. I'm sure I'll look into it after I finally get my PC put together. I notice you like a lot of horror writers like Lovecraft. Have you read any manga of Junji Ito? If so, any one of his tales you like? Mine are The Hanging Balloons, The Will and Love the Tomi Volume 1 and 2. If you have read any of them, will it make its way onto your channel? Thank you for your time. Oh, is there any manga that you enjoy that is horror or not? Well, I actually haven't followed any manga for a few years now, so I'm not really sure what exactly is out there in the horror genre. Akira is still my favorite and probably always will be, and I'm definitely a fan of some of the older mangas out there like Trigun and Evangelion. I am familiar with Junji Ito though, but the only thing of his that I've read so far is Uzumaki, which was magnificent, some of the most unsettling horror I've seen in quite some time. I've been meaning to look into more of his works. As for it making its way onto my channel, perhaps in a review, but beyond that, I'm not sure how I could work it in. Definitely has my recommendation though. Have you any thoughts about your number of subscribers? Followed since the beginning and for a long time it just didn't go nowhere. That was odd, because you are not unknown now and many new subscribers should have come. And not many subscribers randomly unsubscribe. I think some YouTube filters removed many subs. I have, and I really don't know what to make of it. Up until promising the 12,000 subscriber Q&A, any progress I would have otherwise made was immediately lost to whatever stupid thing about YouTube was plaguing so many channel subscriber counts, be it a glitch or something more nefarious. And I'd like to think that the sudden surge is because that's no longer a problem, but I'm still hearing complaints about it from other content creators on a regular basis. So I guess some of my subscribers must have shared my videos in the right place at the right time, particularly the video on Marvel's diversity nonsense, as the views on that video have overtaken every other video I've made to date. Or maybe someone out there with a more substantial subscriber count has been talking about me. If that's the case though, I haven't the foggiest idea of who it would be. Do you know anything about cognitive science or evolutionary psychology? If not, then you should get educated in those things because they tell a lot about how men and women are and why we live in a gynocentric world. I'm familiar with them, but I don't know nearly enough. Which is something I'm trying to correct, as my Existential Crisis series is intended to explore those topics in as much detail as possible. The two names given to me for reference were Gad Sad and Dr. Lehman, but I've so far been unable to get a response from either of them. Any other noteworthy sources you could recommend would be greatly appreciated, as I intend to do as much research as I can to that end. I've been writing since I was a child, and your story seems very similar to mine. Forgive me if this has been answered, but are you published? And if so, how and or with whom did you publish? Been trying to get my book published for almost 3 years now. Unfortunately, not in the traditional sense. Pleasant Nightmares is distributed through Amazon's self-publishing platform, and by my experience, achieving a career as a novelist is a completely different beast ever since self-publishing started gaining popularity. Not really easier, just different. You basically find yourself doing the jobs of a writer, an editor, an agent, and a publishing house all on your own. And much like YouTube, you tend to fall through the cracks and go unnoticed if you can't appeal to your target market and don't spend every waking moment promoting yourself. I wish there was some advice that I could give, but I'm struggling in that area myself. Even after starting this channel, each of the narrations I've posted of my work have averaged less than 1,000 views each, as opposed to the 4,000 or more to each of the other videos I've made. I'm honestly considering taking a course on online marketing, just to better arm myself going forward. I'm happy to trade notes with you though. Just reach out to me on Twitter and we'll talk. Can we get a signed copy of your book? Absolutely. As soon as I have this most recent edit finished, I'll be including some kind of arrangement for that option with the announcement. And I'll most likely also be including that in one of my reward tiers on Patreon, which I'll also be reviewing and modifying soon. Ugh, vampiric narrator, you're killing me, Smalls. I'm gonna leave out the personal questions and the ones I find irrelevant to you and your channel. This is gonna be a long one. Yeah, no kidding. I already know this, but I'm not sure if everyone else does. What are your favorite music groups and genres? Metal is probably my favorite genre, but I listen to most things with the exception of country. No particular favorite bands, honestly, I just listen to whatever catches my ear. One that I've really liked lately, though, is a guy who goes by the name TRUISE. From what I understand, he basically chops up 1980s sci-fi soundtracks and remakes them into his own style of electronic music that he calls the past's future. The first track of his that I heard was Chemical Legs, linked in the description. It probably won't appeal to all tastes, but I definitely dig it. Which Legacy of Kain game did you enjoy the most? Which did you enjoy the least? Well, they all appeal to me much more for the story than for the gameplay, and as such, I don't really have a favorite, as they all work together as a cohesive whole. My least favorite, though, would have to be Blood Omen 2. It just doesn't seem to fit with the rest of the canon, and from what I understand, it's also the only one that wasn't personally overseen by Amy Hennig in its development. Just saying. What is your favorite food? A certain kind of Bavarian potato dumplings called canoodle. My Omi used to make them all the time before she passed away. I could literally live on those things for the rest of my life and die happy. On the subject of fetishes, which one disgusts you the most? None of them really disgust me. Whatever floats your boat, I just don't need to hear about it. I will admit that furries and cloppers are unpleasant to think about, though. What is your honest opinion of my channel? I think you have a great deal of potential, but I feel that you're too divided between comedy and horror. And since those two audiences don't meld particularly well, it would behoove you to pick one and focus on it. Not to say that you should do away with the other entirely, but it will be easier for you to refine your presentation style once you've perfected the type of personality you're going for. But then again, this is coming from someone who's still trying to find his own voice in many ways, so you can take that with a grain of salt. Would you like to do a live stream sometime concerning mental illness? Certainly. I imagine the opportunity will arise after Reckless Truckers collaboration goes live and I have a chance to talk to some of the other contributors. I'll keep you in the know. What is your opinion on male circumcision? I think it's moronic that the benefit of cleanliness is nowhere near worth the nerve damage that it does, and that its normalized state in the West is an abhorrent double standard that feminism refuses to acknowledge. What's your favorite drink? Coffee, I suppose? Do you #420 blaze it? Sure do. Which reminds me, I think I'm running low. Need to call my guy. Is this format I'm using to ask questions bothering you? Well, I did ask you to preface the question with a Q, and you've done that, so no, not really. Is mayonnaise an instrument? No, it's barely a condiment in my opinion, but I suppose it has its uses. That was a shit joke, permission to kill self? Considering I still need you for the In Solomon's Wake project, no, permission denied. What is your favorite hidden YouTube community that not a lot of people know about? My top 3 has to be the people who make videos about Nerf, the ASMR hypnosis videos, and the people who review cartoons. You can tell I have no life if reading this. While I don't really think there are any especially hidden communities that I follow, pretty much everything I follow has a pretty large following depending on the channel. The closest thing I can think to answering your question would be prop design like Indie Mogul or Awme's DIY Prop Shop, either that or weapon and armor designers, my favorites of which would have to be the Baltimore Knife and Sword crew on Man at Arms and York's Brava of the Slingshot channel. Alright, that'll do it for this Q&A, guys. Thanks for all your support in getting my name out there. I've gone much farther and much faster than I could have imagined. Hopefully I can retain this momentum going forward, and I hope to exceed all of your expectations. Once again, any and all suggestions for future content are welcome. Just reach out to me on Twitter or Patreon and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks again, and I'll see you all in my next video. Thanks for watching, guys. If you like what you saw here, have a look at my other videos and leave me your thoughts in the comments. If you support my message, then please like, favorite, and subscribe. If you'd like to help this channel improve, you can reach out to me on Twitter or on Facebook with any suggestions. And if you'd like to support me more directly, please consider following me on Patreon. Links in the description. Thanks again, and I'll catch you all in my next video.